Okay, part two of this video series. Now that we have talked about the matrix as a form, let me give you an example at probably the most sophisticated level of matrix work. This is an example from a unit called Light, Color, Vision, and Optics. It's an article that I embedded in the reading module early if you want to go back and read that entire article again. But this is part of the text pieces that were developed for that unit of study as an example of that article, and I pulled some into an example for you of a task matrix. All right, let's start at the beginning in the first column. So when I introduce this unit of study, I want to start off with the first reading piece for students. So for that, I've inserted it in the first column. And we'll be doing a piece on using visual imagery to pose a focus question to students for the introduction to the unit Light, Color, Vision, and Optics. So I'm going to show them a photograph of an image, and it's an image that went viral on YouTube not long ago, and it's an optical illusion where when you look at the image of the dress in one way you see white and gold, and then you can look at it again and it's blue and black. So this is a very engaging text. It'll introduce students to the unit. It's the hook for the unit of study. And so in this box I've provided information about that, a summary of the purpose of why I selected it, a citation, the name of the article, how to find it, the basics go in this box here. It's included in the first column, of course, because it's a rather low-level activity on Bloom's taxonomy. We're going to read, we're going to think. It's a hook for the unit. If you go down further in it, then I would link my science standards and my ILA, the International Literacy Association reading standards right here, just the ones that go purely with this article, nothing more, not the entire unit. Just this article is linked here. Then I'm going to describe what I have to do before the students read this article from the New York Times. I'm going to show them the image, and I'm going to give them a prompt question, and I'm going to ask them to describe in their science journal, what do they see when they look at that image? What do they see? What are the colors of the dress? They're going to write it down, not discuss it, not share it with anyone, and then they're going to read the article. So while they're reading the article, I also need to think about what activities, strategies, tasks will help students process this reading more successfully. In this case, I've pre-read this article, I've selected it for a specific purpose, but I know that the vocabulary is kind of complex. So what am I going to do to address the complex vocabulary for the students in my middle grades class? It's a pop culture article, so it's going to be very engaging, but it might pose some challenges to my low readers in the class. So I'll need to think about that, and this is the box where I would insert those during reading activities. Perhaps one of the strategies is that you're going to have them do paired reading, not independent reading. If that's the case, share the strategy and say why you've selected it. I would select independent reading here because it's a rather low engagement activity, but I would provide them with some assistance through a reading guide for the vocabulary that they'll encounter. Next, I'm going to talk about what occurs after they've read. In this case, this is just a focus or a hook, so I'm just going to pose a focus question. Why do some of you see this dress as being white and gold while others see the dress as being blue and black? We're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about what they jotted down before they read, when they were looking at the image and before I shared that. This would be a great think, pair, share, or pairs compare activity, and you could describe what you've selected and why you've selected it, and as you'll note, I've put what my focus question is here. That's all that goes in this column because this is rather low activity. If you have another text piece in your 10 text set that would fit this category, and it's quite possible you do, because this column isn't just for hooking into the unit. There could be other low-level activities where the engagement is relatively low. You would simply add those to this column too, and I'm going to show you a way to put more than one text piece in the same column in just a minute. Now I'm going to tier up in blooms to the 20-point column. And remember, don't focus so much on the points as just the activity. This is where we'll do a bit more with critical thinking and application. In this one, I'm going to scaffold with 3 text pieces from my set. And the way that I share that there are 3 here is I just say A, B, and then C. I describe the pieces. Here's the name of the article. For expedience purposes and sharing purposes on this screencast, I did not provide the link to the articles, but you would need to do so. Then I explain the rationale and purpose for including this. Next, I move on to the standards and insert those. Then I move on to what I will do to prepare students to read these text pieces, what questions, prompts, hooks go specifically with these articles as pre-reading strategies, what review, what vocabulary, what perhaps class lecture or brief speech or PowerPoint or video would go here. In fact, a video might be a text piece in this column to prepare students for the next piece, which is more intense, a reading piece. In that case, the video might be A, while the next piece is B then. Then the during activities, you're going to have to think strategically about what's going to help your students get through these pieces better, to understand each one, to process the information. You can label them for what goes with what piece by simply referencing the ABC or 1, 2, 3 again here. Now, afterwards, after they've read this piece, for example, in this light and visual optics unit, I've said what students will do specifically for each of these reading pieces, and here's an example related to literacy that goes here. This is a science lesson. This might be where there's a hands-on activity, an experiment, whatever relates to your discipline might fit very well in this section. Okay? Remember that students may choose doesn't so much mean they choose all the time, is that you're putting everything that you want to do related to this text set on the matrix, and you might be the one helping to facilitate their selection of what they do. Perhaps everyone will do the same thing. Perhaps only some students will do some of these choices and others will do only 1 or 2. You've got to develop this matrix based on your class, your students, on your proposed purpose for this unit of study. As you may have remembered me saying to some of you, only you know whether the 10 pieces in the text set you created do the job well for this unit of study, whether more required, whether less will do the job. That's up to you as the instructional leader. In this case, I could add additional after activities for each of these, and this is where I outline them just using more boxes. You can do up to 4. You can add a 5th if you needed to, if it's an elaborate unit. Now, one thing I want to draw your attention to is the 3 pieces that I've had students read here also provide an opportunity for me to do an after activity that doesn't fit in this column 2, critical thinking and application, so much as it involves deeper application, or the 3rd column here. So what I've done is I've taken an after activity that supports a follow-up to this reading and put it into the 3rd column, and that's this one here, assemble a Braille printer in an out-of-class engineering project. So that's a very sophisticated applications project that fits better into the third column than it does into the second column. So I just dragged that after activity over here, and I probably should reference that it in some way that it's based on column 2 readings. A, B, and C. And that provides a good link there to that. I'll turn that black. And there's a good reference there to the after activity. Now, what might go in this column? Well, for this example, I think the anchor text, the textbook chapter, which is complex, will take several days to read. We'll need several before, during, and after strategy, is appropriate for engaging in deeper application, evaluating, creating. That's the reading that I'm going to base the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy stuff in my class off of. So I've listed it in the third column here. And I've just described it. I would put a reference to the Pearson or whatever the text is here. Make sure that it's well annotated and how I'll use it. Then I'll follow up again. What are the learner standards for both science, in this case, and ILA? And then I'll start fitting in my before, during, and after activities. This is the chapter from the text, the anchor text. There are going to be several before, during, and reading. This will take several days to read this, and so I'll need to break it up and carefully use my A, B's, and C's, whatever coding system I have. You could even color code this here so that we know what goes with what. And then there'll be after activities. In this case, I've given you some examples of after activities that are thinking questions, follow-ups for each of the sections in this chapter of study. And then an extension, again, that's related back to the column 2 work. And you just keep fleshing it out and filling it in. For the last column, this is about writing, because writing is as high as we can get in Bloom's taxonomy and why it's valued at the most points here. It elaborates and extends, so I've decided to use some elaboration text and videos here, and you could annotate and cite those specifically here in more detail. But I've chosen to include ones about color and that are challenging and develop connections for students. And as part of that, they're going to have to do some writing. And here's where I've detailed what we'll be working on related to writing in this activity. And there are several specific elements that I've engaged students in here. And you can pause and read these more carefully and intensely at your leisure. And again, I just keep plugging it in. I talk about what the assessment is. And here's a second text piece follow-up that occurs after. More information, the better. This is a partial task matrix, and it's already 6 pages long, so you can see how this grows exponentially. You'll need to make sure that all 10 of your text pieces are charted here in the appropriate columns with the appropriate spaces. Does it mean that every box in the matrix will be filled in when you finish? Not necessarily. It depends on how this rolls for your unit of study and how you've decided to capture things. I hope this video has been helpful. They're long and a little choppy, but I did my best to provide clarity for you.